Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and for those who are very familiar with the series, welcome back. This is my reading week from the 26th of July until the 1st of August. It was my Read Digital week, so I was reading purely off my Kindle. I did have originally 9 prompts for it. I didn't quite get to the 9, but I did do a hell of a lot of reading and I was so happy for it. If you've been following along in my recent videos, I have been doing a MCU rewatch along with the girls from my book club, and we've been chatting on Discord while we've been doing it. So in the past week we have completed watching Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World and Winter Soldier, which is my personal favourite MCU film of all time. It was an absolute delight to rewatch that film and to chat about it with people. So I've had a good watching week. This week I read a total of 7 different things and a total of 2,042 pages, bringing my yearly reading total up to 259 books. We're going to jump into the different things that I read, starting off with Let Us Dream by Alyssa Cole. This is a 2017 novella from Seditious Sisters and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It is my second time attempting an Alyssa Cole book and I really enjoyed this reading experience. And this story is about Bertha Hines, who runs a cabaret in Harlem in 1917 at the height of when women were really pushing to get the vote in the US. And Bertha is someone who is very much championing the rights of women, and it is the story of her and the Indian chef that she employs at her cabaret as they begin to learn from one another and they develop a relationship amidst this very, I don't even know what the word is, in this time where there is so much change happening. And they've got a lot of pressures from men in the society, but also secret police and immigration and all of that sort of thing in the background. So it's only a short novella, but it was very impactful and I very much enjoyed it. Then I read Will You Be Mine by Rilsey Adams. I didn't realize this was the second book in a series. It is part of the Falling Like a Johnson novella series, I think. I probably won't be continuing the series because I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. We follow JT Johnson, who is an artist, and he has been in love with his best friend Hallie for pretty much the entire time that he has known her. And in this story, she is invited to the wedding of her ex-best friend who she's had a falling out with at some point in the past. And we don't really sort of work out what has gone on in that for a little while, which is a bit weird for me because they are it's a novella, it's very short. Anyway, Hallie asked JT to come to the wedding with her as her fake boyfriend so that people won't be asking any questions of her, and obviously things happen. It was fine. Normally I'm really a big fan of the fake dating trope, but this one, I don't know, maybe it's because I hadn't read the first book in the novella series and I just felt like I was missing something the whole time. Then I read Say Yes to the Marquess by Tessa Dare. This is the second book in the Castles Ever After series. This was published in 2014 by Avon and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoy this series. It's a hell of a lot of fun. In this story, we follow Cleo, who is engaged to Piers Brandon, the Marquess of Granville, only she's been engaged to him for 8 years and he's been off the continent for the majority of that time and has not seen fit to officially marry her yet. And so she's kind of fed up with that and she seeks out Piers's brother Rafe and with a plan to break off the engagement, and she needs him to sign off on it. And Rafe is not pleased with this prospect because if the engagement is off, then he might have to take over some of the duties for the family and he has no intention of doing that. So he decides to take it upon himself to actually plan this wedding and to make sure that Cleo marries his brother until he begins to fall in love with her. And that's where the story goes, and there are some hilarious scenes. There's a great cake fight and over-the-top wedding preparations, and the whole thing is just delightful. It was one of the funnest reads of the week, for sure. And because I'm terrible about this, Will You Be Mine was for the Read Digital Challenge to read a book with a woman of colour author or protagonist, and it had both. And Say Yes to the Marquess was for the challenge to read historical. The next book I read was Queen Move by Kennedy Ryan. This is a 2020 release from Blue Box Press. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It is sort of a follow-on from her Kingmaker duet. No, from the All the King's Men duet, which I loved, and you've heard me rave about the characters and the story a lot. So in this particular story, we follow Kimber, who was the best friend of Lennox, the main character in the All the King's Men duet. And she's a very fierce, independent woman who is in her late 30s, early 40s. I can't remember off the top of my head. She has worked hard to succeed in a world where women, and especially women of colour, do not always have a really strong, powerful voice. And she is very, very good at her job. She helps get presidents elected, as per the last couple of books. However, we begin this story when she is an infant, and we meet her and we meet her best friend growing up, Ezra, and their families were best friends and they were raised together and everything was going really, really well until their early teens. And then something happens and their families have a falling out and then they don't see each other again for 20 years. The next time that Kimber sees Ezra, it's at her father's funeral, and then she sees that he's got a child and is in a happy relationship, and she doesn't think much of it. And then again, 2 years later, she's taking a break from her career to recharge. And she goes home to visit her family and Ezra is there. And the two start talking again, and we discover that Ezra's relationship with his long-term partner is not quite as it seems. And by the time Kimber gets there, they have decided to separate. And so as Kimber and Ezra spend more time together, they begin to redevelop the relationship that they had, or the beginnings of the relationship that they had way back when. And so it's very much a look at adult relationships and how life is complicated and messy and there is no quick and easy answers or fixes to anything, and how family secrets can really hinder relationships as well. I really enjoyed this. It's very powerful, it's very slow burn, and it's very much kind of a second chance romance, and it was honestly just delightful. Kennedy Ryan is amazing. I read the short story Ladies' Night in Carver City by Katie Robert. This is part of the Wicked Villain series, and it was a Patreon short that she released, so I got access to it. And it's pretty much like a couple of pages long, and it is Aurora, who is one of the characters who hasn't had her own book yet, but has appeared in pretty much every other book in the series. She gets to take all of her girlfriends out for a night on the town in the city, and she's just kind of adorable, and I love her. Her book is the next one, Queen Takes Rose, and I'm honestly just hanging out for it because Aurora has just been one of those delightful, sunshiny characters through the whole series, and she's finally getting her book, so yay. For the challenge to read a book about friendship, I read The Overdue Life of Amy Byler by Kelly Harms. This was a 2019 release from Lake Union Publishing, sorry. And I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. This was more chick lit women's fiction than romance, although there is some romance elements in the story. And we are following the main character, Amy Byler, as she crosses paths with her husband for the first time in 3 years after he basically left his family, her and her 2 children, took off overseas with a new girlfriend and to follow his career, and has had literally nothing to do with her or his kids for that time. And he turns up and he decides that he wants to reconnect with his family and reconnect with his kids and look after them for the summer. And at first Amy is very resistant to this because she's had to raise them on her own, and she doesn't like the fact that he has come back into her life or their life and decided that he is going to fix everything, or try to. But eventually she is convinced by her kids and by her best friend that maybe having a summer off and not having to worry about the kids is something that she needs. She's a librarian, so she just ends up booking herself into a conference in New York City and reconnects with a friend from college and decides that she's going to go and spend a week in the city and enjoy herself. This turns into a much longer stay, as when she reconnects with her girlfriend, who is now the editor of a very popular women's lifestyle magazine, Amy finds herself getting a makeover and enjoying life as a woman rediscovering herself in the city. And the whole thing is actually really fun and really delightful and entertaining, and there's some really funny moments as she gets herself into situations she doesn't quite understand, including exploring online dating. And she always finds herself coming back to this one guy that she met at the conference, who they've decided they can only just be friends, but they don't really want to just be friends, but it's complicated. And a whole lot of other things happen, including something that is really quite traumatic for Amy, and she has to return home to her family. And the 2 lives that she's been living over the summer sort of collide, and she has to work out, can she maintain both of them, or does she have to choose one of them? It was really fun. It was really entertaining. There were some great friendship moments in there, so I enjoyed it. It's not my usual type of thing that I would read, but it was very delightful. I also read The Devil's Daughter by Katie Roberts. This was my pick for the free choice square in Read Digital. It is the first book in the Hidden Sin series. It was published in 2017 by Montlake Romance, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This is sort of, well, I think it was romantic suspense, but it's more mystery suspense with some romantic elements thrown into it. But it's Katie Roberts, so I adored it. We follow Eden Collins, who left her hometown of Clear Springs, Montana, and became a profiler for the FBI. And part of the impetus for that is that she left behind her mother, who is the leader of a cult in this small town, and she just had to get out. But when the murder of a young girl is discovered, she finds herself being drawn back to her hometown because there are some eerie similarities to things that she remembers from growing up within her mother's cult. And there she connects with the local sheriff, Zach Owens, who doesn't trust her because of her history and her mother's history with the town. And yet he finds that he needs her expertise and her knowledge of what it was like living inside this cult, which is a Hades and Persephone cult. Didn't know that going into it, so that was a delightful surprise. And the whole thing was just, it was very suspenseful, very entertaining. I don't know what it is about Katie Roberts' work, but she just draws me into her stories so easily. Even though I'm not a big suspense fan, I loved it. And I love anything with cults, and the fact that it was a Hades and Persephone cult was just kind of really awesome. Not the cult part, because that was very creepy. And then finally, I decided to abandon the rest of the prompts, and I just wanted to read something that I wanted to read, and that was The Devil of Downtown by Joanna Shupe. This is the 3rd and final book in the Uptown Girls series. It is Gilded Age historical romance. It was published just recently in 2020 by Avon, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The whole series we've been following the Green sisters, and in this case we're following the youngest Green sister, Justine, who is sort of the do-gooder of the family. And she spends a whole lot of her time downtown helping out families and chasing down deadbeat husbands and trying to hold them accountable to the families that they have left behind. In doing so, she enlists the help of Jake Mulligan, the undisputed king of sort of New York's downtown underworld. He's very taken aback initially by this woman who just comes in and demands what she wants, and then he begins to fall for her, and he ends up finding himself getting involved in a whole lot of her work, even though he doesn't really want to. And as that happens, they begin to discover their feelings for one another. And honestly, this was just a whole lot of fun. It was so delightful. I think Justine is my favorite of the Green sisters. And the other two, actually, even though I really like them in their stories, they really bothered me in this because they treated her like a child. Even though she is very strong, very independent, very capable, they still really tried to smother her, which is ironic given that they all spurned their family's good name in the name of love, and yet they have issues with her. So like that part bothered me a little bit, but the rest of the story was great, and it's very steamy, and I loved it. So those were the books that I read this week for my Read Digital challenge. I'll leave links to them all down below. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books or if you're planning on reading them in the future. Alternatively, feel free to let me know what you have been reading in the last 7 days. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are staying safe and healthy, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.